Joe Biden's biggest weakness in the upcoming presidential election will be surrounding concerns as to his cognitive ability. On that front, this hasn't been a good week for him. On Monday, this happened.
Right after I was elected, I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. And it was in the south of England. And I sat down and I said, "America's back." And Mitterrand from France, looked at me and said, "You know, why? How long are you back for?"
It was Mitterrand from Germany. No, Mitterrand from France. I was like, thank God he corrected himself. The problem was Mitterrand was president of France between 1981 and 1995, and he died in 1996. So wherever or not he got the country right, he was still talking about the wrong person. Of course, people do make mistakes. Macron, Mitterrand, they both start with the same letter. You can see how it happens. Unfortunately, though, for Biden, it happened again on Wednesday. Biden confused Angela Merkel for Helmut Kohl in an anecdote he delivered to a fundraiser. Now, Kohl was Chancellor of Germany from 1982 to 1998 and died in 2017. Obviously, Helmut Kohl and Angela Merkel, there's a gender difference. They don't look much alike. So unclear what's going on there. Last night, more bad news arrived for Joe Biden. So here, the special counsel appointed by Biden's Justice Department released a report on Joe Biden. Now, the investigation was into Joe Biden having had some classified documents at his house after his period as vice president. So as vice president, he was allowed unlimited access to them. After he left office, he wasn't, but he had some in his garage. The Justice Department then sort of appoints a special counsel to look into Joe Biden. They've released that report, and there is some good news, which is that Joe Biden won't be prosecuted for having, misplaced classified documents. The bad news, though, is the reason the special counsel gave. The special counsel wrote this: "We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observations of him, he is someone for whom many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him, by then a former president well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness." So they're saying he's beyond the point where he can have a mental state of willfulness, which is worrying for a president. Elsewhere in the report, he said this: "In his interview with our office, Mr. Biden's memory was worse. He did not remember when he was vice president, forgetting on the first day of the interview when his term ended." And they quote him: "If it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president?" And forgetting on the second day of the interview when his term began in 2009, am I still vice president? He did not remember even within several years when his son, Beau, died. Now, this is quite damning for a president. So saying he's not going to be prosecuted. He's only not going to be prosecuted because he doesn't seem, particularly competent of mind to stand in a dock. So the commander in chief, the most powerful person in the world, essentially, that's not particularly reassuring. We should be somewhat careful here, though, because it is likely that this could be a case of troublemaking by a rather political special counsel. Robert Hur he was a special counsel. He's a registered Republican. Between 2018 and 2021, he served as the Trump-appointed district attorney to the state of Maryland. I'm sure he would have known that these comments would be damaging to a president running for re-election. It also seems to be not entirely necessary to put them into a document such as this. However, even if this was political, kind of the Democrats who are to blame, because it was Biden's Justice Secretary who appointed this guy to be special counsel. So I presume they were saying, well, if we get a Republican, then it's going to seem really fair. Well, if you get a Republican in a polarized system such as you have in the United States at the moment, you are, setting yourself up for some real difficulties. After the publication of the report, Biden held a hastily organized press conference where he was grilled about his memory.
In his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. That's
Your
my
memory has gotten worse, Mr. President.
my memory is not. My memory is fine. My memory. Take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen?
I quite like that first line. I am well-meaning, I am elderly, but I know what the hell I'm doing. Unfortunately, at that same press conference, he went on to say this.
The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side.
I mean, people often say that Joe Biden sort of mixes up the American interest with the Israeli interest. Now he's mixing up Americans' neighbors with Israeli neighbors. He's calling Egypt Mexico, which is rather strange. Aaron, this has been a difficult week for Joe Biden, hasn't it?
Well, look, Michael, it happens. Mexicans, Egyptians, they're both quite ethnically ambiguous nations, An Egyptian could easily be a Mexican. They tan very well. So, yeah, it's been a strange week, Michael. I'm obviously kidding. It's a ridiculous thing to say. I suppose they might say, well, borders, we've got a border with Mexico, the issue with Egypt, Gaza, the border, I don't know. But it has been a very difficult week. And Michael, this is really now coming to a head. He is now clearly in an advanced state of cognitive decline. This is not a joke. This is not a meme. He probably wasn't entirely with it in 2020, but he could function. I remember having doubts about his cognitive abilities in one of the primary debates, and then he skewered Bernie Sanders. I don't know what the hell they injected him with, but he was on fire. So I thought, you know what? Okay. And Biden surprised all of us, probably including himself, in terms of beating Trump, right? I think that surprised lots of people. Of course, the surprise variable was COVID, and the margin of victory, because it's a electoral college system, wasn't as big as it might have looked. But, it was still impressive. And actually, his legislative agenda on some things has been very impressive. IRA, for instance. His relationship to unions, very good. I'm not disregarding any of that. I don't want Donald Trump to win, but equally, he clearly has advanced dementia, right? I mean, that second clip you showed, it's like a guy who's just slowing down. His Duracell batteries are coming to an end, And any 81-year-old, this is not ageist, it's not disrespecting older people. Any 81-year-old is going to struggle being the president of the United States of America. Michael, you're in your early 30s. I'm in my late 30s. We would struggle to complete a primary, right? If he wants to become the Republican candidate or the Democrat, anybody in the world, I mean, their 20s would struggle. It's a physical, emotional roller coaster. He's 81 with the hardest job, arguably, in the world, the most media exposure of any public figure on earth at a very important time for all of us. And clearly he's not up to the job. And I don't think it's a left-wing position to say, don't talk about it, just ignore it. That's not adequate because, again, the stakes here are really high. And I think one of the reasons why, Michael, just to finish, Netanyahu's done what he has done in Rafah in the last 24 hours, the reason why they're ignoring John Kirby, humiliating the Americans, is because they know the commander-in-chief can't tie his own shoelaces. They know Joe Biden can't complete sentences. So what better opportunity, what better set of circumstances to, if not get everybody out of Gaza, or 2.5 million Gazans, which I think they probably would like to do, many people in the Israeli government. Well, at least we'll be able to create a buffer zone and get maybe 500,000 into Egypt or whatever. And that is directly related to the condition of Joe Biden. That doesn't mean Donald Trump will be a better president for the Palestinian people. But I think, it's important to remember, Rashid Khalidi said something really interesting earlier on this week. He said, Joe Biden as president has been worse for the Palestinian people than Donald Trump was. That doesn't mean, therefore, that Donald Trump after 2024 won't be any worse. He probably would be. But this idea that Biden has been better than Trump doesn't really add up. And so there are really big implications for his mental state being what it is. And frankly, I feel sorry for his kids, his grandkids, because this is how he will be remembered. And if he does win a second term, he won't complete it. He will be a laughing stock. He will clearly disintegrate. He will disintegrate in office.
What do you think the Democrats are going to do? Because I mean, there are sort of precedents of a sitting president saying, "I'm not going to run again." Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1960s, but then he was replaced, and then the Democrats got trashed by Richard Nixon that time around. So, when I've been reading about this, people who sort of do recognize that Joe Biden is a bad candidate, they're sort of like, well, he's a bad candidate, but all the other alternatives seem just as bad. Now, I'm not convinced by that argument, but I don't think it's a crazy argument either. So, like, I mean, if I was them, I would just, as quickly as possible, put in someone a bit younger and a bit more competent, and then just all rally around him, or her. But that's not really how politics works, isn't it? Once a vacancy arrives, then you end up with a big sort of, circular firing squad potentially. The primaries have already began. I mean, what can they do?
No, it's too late. It's too late. It should have been Gavin Newsom. I don't share his politics, but he has had a big job. He's got a national profile. He's got some kind of a record. I mean, Republicans would say a bad record, but he's got some kind of a record. California's done some pretty good things on green energy. So, I think it probably should have been Newsom. Again, I'm not saying that's somebody on the left. I'm saying that's somebody who's trying to be impartial. I don't agree with his politics. But I think it's too late. And the point you've made about LBJ, really, really important, Michael. I think when Lyndon Johnson stood down, he was in his 60s, right? I think Lyndon Johnson died quite young, mid to late 60s. I think it was related to lung cancer. Biden's 81. And there's two separate points here, Michael, which is, could Joe Biden contest an election and win? Yes, he could, right? I don't think he would, because the key polling in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, even though Biden's leading often in polls with regards to the national vote, he's losing in those states. And there are 4 or 5 states, if he loses, it flips, right? Trump just needs to win 4 or 5 of these states and it flips and he wins the presidency. So it's close, but could Biden win? Yes, absolutely Biden can win. He did it before, so why can't he do it again, right? Very simple logic there. But then there's the separate question of, okay, well, would he be a good president? I mean, he's doing okay because he's got advisors around him and so on. He's clearly not all there, but they're still implementing a legislative agenda. But could they pull that off again? I think no. I think it brings American politics and public life and American democracy into disrepute. If you literally have a man in his early to mid 80s falling apart in the highest office of the land, I think it goes actually a lot deeper than party political interest. I think it completely undermines American democracy because literally hundreds of millions of Americans, 330, 340 million of them, I think the majority of Americans would look at the guy and think, how the hell is this man the president? How the hell is this man in charge? Maybe nobody is. And they'd kind of be right, wouldn't they? I mean, look at, like we said, John Kirby and what's going on with Israel and them just ignoring the US State Department. So I think it goes very deep. And there's 2 separate questions there. And of course, if you think it's all about stopping Trump at any cost, and remember, Michael, Trump only serves 1 term, right? He can only go to 2028. It's not like Trump is a young man. He'd have 2 terms. He's groomed a successor. He hasn't. And I think that there has to be some part of the Democrats now that think the long game. The problem for them, of course, is that Trump wants to throw a fair few of them into prison. I think the reason why they didn't get behind Newsom, probably when they should have, is because there was a bit of hopium going on, right? Trump will be stopped from running again by some court somewhere. I mean, plausibly, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, the Supreme Court is stacked with conservatives. Why would they listen to what Colorado has to say? So in all likelihood, he is going to run. So I think it's been a really big political miscalculation here. But like I say, the consequences of a second Biden presidency are almost psychological with regards to their importance and people's disintegrating, eroding belief in American democracy.
I think he would get an initial boost just by the fact of beating Trump, right? Because lots of the doubts would dissipate quite quickly if he won an election, because that's an impressive feat in and of itself. But then, potentially by the end of the 4th year, I mean, he might just not do much public speaking by that point if he's not got a restand. Maybe just go into the background. But yeah, all very depressing. It doesn't really speak very well of the American Republic.